Hey, everybody, thank you for joining the Diary of a Bald Man today. So, we're going outside of our normal modus operandi. And I can't say that because I'm trying not to sneeze and cough during this because of sinuses today. On some of our previous interviews, we've talked to people, obviously from my background in safety, people that I've trained with, people that I've worked with. But today's guests are none of those. She does have a similar experience in that she worked in law enforcement. And as a matter of fact, she just retired and is now going on to new things. Julie, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you today? Thank you for
Good,
having me.
good. No, it was great to see you within the podcast group on Facebook and get to, initially get the conversation going. But where are you joining us from today?
Currently I live in Cleveland, well, right outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I moved here from Chicago. I retired in March from the Chicago Police Department. I have 25 years as a Chicago.
25 years.
Mhm.
So let me ask you, before you transitioned, was Cleveland like your first place you wanted to go to, and that's why you guys jumped on that opportunity?
No, no offense to Clevelanders, but I don't think this is on anyone's list
Yeah,
to be the top place to go. My husband is
uh,
originally from the area, and
nice.
so we have been commuting back and forth for our entire relationship. So this is the first time that we will actually live in the same house permanently.
Wow,
Knock on wood.
that's got to be a change, coming from Chicago to Cleveland.
Yes, it is. It's not as crazy out here, that's for sure.
Not as crazy. So, to get people to understand, you coming out of the Chicago, Illinois area, now going into Cleveland. When you were back in Chicago, what was the number one radio station for you when you lived out there? And were you like one of Mancow's biggest,
Ah,
fans?
oh my God, talk about flash in the past. I did listen to him actually. I am a very eclectic music listener, so I like all different stations, and I'm definitely I switch them all the time. So I don't have one specifically that I absolutely loved and listened to religiously. And oftentimes I listen to various podcasts, so I don't even listen to the radio podcasts or just streaming music. I'm big into
Okay.
that. hmm
So, being from Chicago, another serious question that people always want to know. With your pizza, do you go for thin crust? Do you like the pie? What is a true Chicago pizza for you?
I, I think true Chicagoans, and I can't speak for all of them, but I think we are thin crust people. We don't really do deep dish. That's for when friends or family come in and we're taking them around. That we do deep dish. It's not bad, but if we ate it every day, we'd probably weigh about 500 pounds.
That's hot. That's
hmm
hot. More to love.
More to
So,
love for sure. But it is
it,
delicious. I would recommend everybody if you go to Chicago to try it. But I mean, we have such great food in Chicago. I would not pinhole yourself into just deep dish pizza.
oh, I agree. I was up there for a previous assignment with People's Energy, and I got to actually see the taste. And
That's
God,
a good place to check out a lot of different food.
yeah, it was really good. Plus, the people we were working with took us up and down places around Cicero and stuff like that. So, like you said, very eclectic, very diverse type of, restaurants and ethnicity and stuff up there. So it was great. Yeah, and that was one of the things I really enjoyed. And with you being from Chicago, when you got to enjoy things like the taste and stuff, what would you say is one of your favorite things outside Chicago, outside of pizza? What was a food that you really enjoyed? If you had somebody to come up there and say, hey, you've got to try this.
Um, for me, I don't eat seafood, so hard to tell on that. But
Okay.
I'm a huge, I love Italian food. Who doesn't? If you
Yes.
don't, there's something wrong with you. Um, and I think we have some of the best Italian restaurants in the nation that I've been to. There's such diversity in the Italian restaurants. It depends on where their family is from, what kind of sauce
No,
they have. Just different varieties of food. So quite the selection.
no, that sounds good. So, you having spent 25 years in law enforcement, this is something I generally ask a lot of friends of mine. You're on the road
Uh-oh.
all day. No, no, no.
Go
So
ahead.
what was your go-to meal knowing you may get a call? Mine, I love dirty water hot dogs. I would try hot dogs at different locations just because I knew, okay, I've got to get back into my zone. You know, supervisor's coming, so I just choke and go. What was a food that you enjoyed while you were on the street?
Um, really, I love Italian beef. There's nothing like it, and unfortunately, they don't have any out here in Cleveland that I've found, but I'll have to bring
Oh
my
my
own back
God.
when I go visit. Yes, but Italian beef is probably one of the biggest staples in Chicago. I love Italian beef, but as you're on the road and you're driving around, thankfully I was in a city, not a desolate type of place. There's plenty to choose from, but gosh, we had all the local restaurants. We never really went to chain restaurants, which is funny, because I feel like they have so many, mom and pop restaurants, and I love
Right,
that.
right.
So
I do too. Hole in the walls. Yeah.
yes, so we really try to frequent a lot of those. But I would say our number one go-to is probably, I mean, we did eat pizza. I'm not going to lie. We ate a lot of pizza. It's something that you can grab and go. And especially if we had a major demonstration going on, we could
Oh,
just grab a bunch of pizzas and throw them in the car and eat them as we go.
well, and it's funny, let's get back into that law enforcement. So you
Sure.
being in that area, what inspired you to become a police officer? And how did your journey from patrolling the streets end up with doing counterterrorism?
Well, it's kind of funny how I got into it. They say everything happens for a reason, and I really believe in that. I had no desire to be a police officer. It wasn't
Really?
even, yeah, it was not even in my forethought. Um, I was a young mother. I was raising, my son, and I was going to college. I wanted to get into psychology and I think work with children predominantly. And it's kind of foreshadowing how life works out, right? So during school, when I was going to college, I had a friend, and that friend comes from a law enforcement family. Her whole family was in law enforcement. Her father, generational. In Chicago,
Okay.
it's generational for law enforcement and fire.
Yes.
And so she wanted to go and take the test and did not want to go alone. And she asked me to come with her, or at least go down there and kind of just be a support system. So I said, okay, I'll go. I paid I think it was $25 at the time, which was a lot of money in 1998 for me,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No,
being 20, whatever I was, 23 years old. Um, so it was pre-cell phone years. So I go down to what is now the United Center. It's a huge facility. I could not find her, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just go in and take this silly test and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I took the test, and eventually, I think it was like 6 months later. I wasn't even thinking about it. I could care less if I passed or didn't pass or scored or whatever it was at the time. And they sent a letter like, hey, we want you. And I was like,
they had to blow you away.
really? Oh, okay. Now what do I do? And at the time, I was working for ABF Freight Trucking Company, and I was also bartending, and I was going to college full time. I was a very busy person. So I looked at my dad and I said, what do I do? And he said, why not try it? You can always quit if you don't like it. And I thought,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I thought, wow, that's great. The irony in the story is the friend that begged me to go for weeks on end never even went to take the test.
You're kidding. Whatever
She
happened to her?
never showed up.
That
She
heifer.
completed, graduated college, and went on to a whole other type of field industry. Yeah. So that's kind of funny that she never even came, and it was her desire to become a police officer, not mine. And so, boy, talk about a long, lengthy career. I mean, I've worked on tactical teams. I worked in community policing. I worked as an undercover buy officer in narcotics unit, and then eventually I went into foot patrol team, which was located in our central business district downtown area.
Okay.
And we did just that. We walked around on foot, and we handled anything from shoplifters to icicles falling off the building to directing traffic, parades, protests, sports games, concerts, you name it, we did it. And then I kind of transitioned into working into our command posts, which if you have a major event, any major event you go to, most of them have some type of centralized command center where you're,
Right.
you know, you're all in communication, you're watching the crowd and seeing what's happened. And so that kind of pushed me into counterterrorism. And I worked for the intelligence unit, and eventually I worked for doing a lot of operations communications. So during major incidents, any major incident that was occurring.
Okay. Well,
And I loved that part. I love public safety in general. And as you know, coming from a background of law enforcement, there's nothing better than helping people, right? That's why we go into it.
absolutely. Now, I did not get the 20 plus years that you did. I went outside of that for different reasons, but
Hmm.
the fact that you did, and one of my very best friends in Georgia, Stephanie Fitzgerald, was just like you. But she did it, she is now a psychologist, but she started in law enforcement because of similar interests like you, wanting to help people, but on a different level. And so it's just great to speak to someone, that is retired, went through the different processes, and now you're thinking about what's your next step.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, think about everything you've done. But
I,
go ahead. Go ahead, Chief.
no, it's a lengthy career when you look back at it, because I think when you retire, you think, well, what can I do? And then you think, well, I can do a lot of things because I have all this diverse
Absolutely.
background. And one of the things I failed to mention is I also assisted in the creation and implementation of our juvenile crisis intervention training program, which is now used nationally by other agencies.
Nice.
Hmm.
That goes a lot into that community policing, and that's got to be difficult, especially with the youth of today, and getting officers to understand how to approach them and things like that.
Correct. And, unfortunately, mental health, it was not really taught to us when I went through the academy. I don't know
No,
about you. Right.
no.
And so when we know better, we do better. And I always try to explain to people, like, I've watched a lot of doctor shows, but I could
By
not watch
doctor, you mean?
doctor, surgeon, like whatever, ER or
Oh,
whatever the
okay, okay. I didn't know
mainstream
if you meant
doctor
like,
hospital
oh, okay,
shows. Yeah.
ER. Yeah,
Right. But we couldn't walk into a surgery room and perform surgery, right? We have to have some type of training and some type of knowledge
right.
and experience. And so with police officers, I think it has to be the same about mental health. We have to train them so they understand it better, so they can do better.
Well, that makes sense because, a lot of people don't think about it. Back in the day, we reinforced use of force continuum, and then
Mm-hmm.
we had interpersonal communications and all
Mm-hmm.
things like this, to control things, but not work with them. So when you look at your CIT experience, can you share a particularly challenging or memorable experience from your time? And how did it shape your perspective on law enforcement today?
Sure. Well, CIT is not easy. And let me preface this by saying that I have a mentally ill son who is now 30. And at the time I was raising him and trying to get him properly diagnosed. So I kind of wear two hats in the world of mental health. I'm a parent of someone who suffers, but I'm also in law enforcement trying to train people. But what better experience, right? Mental health, going into mental health and dealing someone with the mental health crisis is something that takes a lot of time. So you have to have patience, which is why I'm not sure how they do it now, but back when we wanted people to volunteer for the training. We didn't want to force it upon people because you want the right people to show up. You want
Oh,
to be
absolutely. Yeah.
right. You want to be empathetic and sympathetic to what they're going through and dealing with. I mean, I'll give you a brief example. There was an elderly woman who had set fire to her apartment, to the wall.
Well,
Not on purpose, I don't think. I think it was an accident, not really sure. Anyway, and I'll try to cut this story down very short. But so I get the call from the management company. At the time, I'm in community policing, and she was elderly. She was in her 80s, and they said, please, can you come out? This woman needs to go to the hospital. She needs some treatment, therapy, medication, whatever it may be. And by the way, we just want to warn you that this woman was in another altercation with police. She didn't live, not in the same residence, in a different location. And the police officers ended up tasing her.
Oh.
And so there's something with a lawsuit against the police department in the city of Chicago. And I thought, oh, shit. Can I swear? Sorry.
No,
I thought,
damn,
oh,
please.
okay. Okay. I
No,
thought,
you can say whatever you want on here.
okay. I was like, oh, shit. Why me? Why did I pick up the phone? Great. I don't want to be sued. Biggest fear of law enforcement. Another story. But
Yeah.
so I called the lieutenant in the CIT unit and said, would you go with me and help me handle this situation? So we went over the apartment, my partner and I. She was female, I was female. My
Oh,
lieutenant.
okay, good. I was going to ask pronouns. I didn't
Yeah.
want to assume.
Excuse me. My lieutenant and the sergeant that came with were male.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny as we started to gain entry into her apartment. Now we're talking our way in slowly.
No.
I could tell that even though she was saying some bizarre things, she did not like men. It was really setting her off and making her much more agitated. And so I kind of looked at my bosses and waved them off and said, hey, listen, I need you to kind of stay back a little bit. Let us come in. So the funny part is now we get into her home and now we're having conversation and now we see that she was making sandwiches and she has a very, very large knife on the counter. And I'm looking at my partner, my partner's looking at me, and we're trying to position ourselves around, and my partner finally gets behind her and grabs the knife and hides it, out of sight, out of mind, knock on wood.
There's a good meme behind this somewhere about handing somebody a knife to calm them down and make a sandwich.
Well, we didn't hand them the knife. The knife was already there on the counter. But she did offer us a sandwich, which I thought was nice. But, they can be very unpredictable. So you have to proceed very cautiously. And you have to keep your distance for safety. And the last thing I want to do, this woman was about, I don't know, maybe 100 pounds. And she's in her 80s. And the last thing I want to do is put my hands on an 80-something-year-old person, right?
Yeah, tase them.
Right, who is apparently in crisis. And I can't even comment on what happened before because I wasn't at that scene. So I'm just going with what I know in front of me. So the long story short is she ended up trusting us. I called her granddaughter and I asked her to come over and sit with us and take her to the hospital. She finally agrees to go to the hospital. This was probably about 3 hours. Now, mind you, my bosses are sitting in the hallway with their foot in the door for 3 hours.
Wow.
Just, as our backup for safety. But we talk her into coming into the squad car. We did not handcuff her. We bring her to the hospital. And I sat in that waiting room with her. I don't know how much experience you have with bringing people in crisis into the hospital, but it's not like when people are having a heart attack, they don't rush you in. They leave,
absolutely not.
Yeah, they leave you sitting there for a very long time. So I told my partner, I think, it was like time for us to technically get off work, and she had kids and she had to attend to, and my son was already being taken care of. Then I said, I'll sit with the family. Go ahead, go on home. Mm-hmm. And I sat with the granddaughter sitting on the floor with her grandmother, and we had a very open and honest conversation about what had transpired before and what had transpired today. And she said, Officer Joyce, I want you to understand something. First of all, I come from a police family. Our whole family is police. And I was shocked that she had said that. And she said, and I don't know if you know this, but we did sue the city of Chicago and the police department for what had happened last time to my grandmother. And I want you to understand something. We did not, as a family, file that lawsuit for some type of revenge. What we wanted to do was raise awareness and change the training.
Yeah, I can see that. From what you've been saying, I can see where that'd be a necessity.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And she said, I am so glad that you showed up today. And so the long and short of it is we kept in communication for many years. And as I was doing CIT training outside of our department specifically, I would bring her to all these trainings to tell her story. You know, maybe we didn't get it right the first time, and maybe it was to no fault of those officers that were on scene because they didn't know better and they weren't trained to do better. But now we got a redo and we did it right. And I did find out years later that she did put her mother into, from the money that she got awarded from the city.
Really?
Her grandmother, not her mother. She put her into a beautiful nursing facility where she was very well taken care of and lived out the rest of her years until she passed. And I don't remember what year that was. You know, your career becomes a blur, but
Oh, yeah.
I thought everything happens for a reason. So I was meant to take that call that day and be that person that was there. And but I will tell you, that whole day, probably, gosh, I had to be there 10 hours at least at work from start to finish, from answering the phone to leaving the hospital. It was a very long day. But the thing is, it came out well. It was nonviolent. No one got hurt. And everyone was happy in the end.
And that's good to hear because, you can never tell going into a situation, whether you're doing a dynamic entry or anything like that, what you're going to face, the mentality of the individual, what were triggers, like when your male counterparts came in, your bosses, and then to find out that, she really did not want male officers in there. And, the thing is, it sounds like you had the great observation skills and communication skills necessary with the empathy and the sympathy of the situation to make that command decision. Hey, guys, step out,
Correct.
but you still had that support.
Correct.
And, I can honestly say both in my current field as a safety consultant, previously working as a contractor in law enforcement, you can see and identify times when better types of education like the CIT is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I mean, CIT should be, I feel like it should be in everything. We should have it in colleges. We should have it in workplaces, especially workplaces. I mean, when you think about all the active shooters that we've had in the past
Yes.
decade or so, people aren't aware. They're not taught. They don't know what to do. Everyone knows who the weird person is, right? At work, like, oh, they're a little off. Don't we joke
Absolutely.
about that? Isn't that like the joke? Like, oh, I'm glad they like me because one day they're going to go off.
Yeah, and it sounds funny because, talking about law enforcement, we were using an analogy. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Super Troopers. So they
Years ago, yes.
they show the officers that were cutting up. And then, the one that was always a pain in the ass, he was always like, push for this, push for this. And they said the one that was holding on too tight, that's the one that was going to snap. And they were showing it with other figures. So I just want you to think for just a second, Julie. If you were to watch Chicago PD, who plays you in that show?
Oh, gosh. Wow. Well, I've never seen it. I'm sorry.
Okay, what about Super Trooper?
Who plays me?
I know, I forget the names, but...
Like back when? Let's go with Heather Locklear. Wasn't she a police officer way back when?
Yeah. Or Charlie's Angels. Which one would you be? Because you're like, what, 3 foot, 42 inches? Something like
Correct.
that?
Yes, yeah. A whole 5 foot 1.5.
Yeah.
I like to give myself the extra half.
Well,
if I have a little lift in my shoes, I could almost make 5'2".
Yeah, in heels, I am 6'4". So...
Are you walking around in heels?
No, I'm sitting right now, but
Okay.
I mean, I just want to make that clear. I seem taller than sometimes, and we're joking to cut up, and this is good. But I wanted to get back to your CIT for just a second. But before I ask the CIT thing, outside of going into a situation in law enforcement, what was the most bizarre thing where you really couldn't negotiate or you didn't know what was going on? You had absolutely no training. Was there ever a really bizarre case or incident that just stuck out to you?
You mean on the job?
On the job, yeah.
Boy,
if you can't talk about it, yeah. But
no, I mean, I'm
bizarre
retired.
Situation?
I can talk about anything. I mean, Bizarre situation. I mean, I I
I'll
worked in
give
the
you
city
one.
of Chicago. There's a lot of bizarre situations I think you're not trained for. Some
Yeah.
of them being there were farm animals in the middle of downtown.
Huh. Okay. Well, your
You
food
know,
was fresh from what I remember.
it was like, yeah. And I mean, it's kind of a funny story. So it was great. We had a homeless person and they had a rooster. And the rooster was making a lot of noise. So someone
Yeah.
called on them. And then, and this is actually, someone took a photo of it and it became my friend's favorite photo because I am standing there staring at this person and the rooster thinking, I have no idea what to do because I have no idea the laws regarding roosters in the city of Chicago because I've never encountered something like this before.
That is funny. That is
Now,
funny.
you
What do
being
you do?
honest, it might be a little normal for you. Me? Not at all.
That- So outside of the bizarre thing, as a retired officer, what would you say is your hidden talent? I mean, did you perfect the art of parallel parking or, you know,
Yes.
you could do
Yes.
amazing things with your ASP or APR-24, whatever you used.
Boy, parallel parking really is a thing.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you've been in a big city, you understand it. If you're not from a big city, you don't understand it. Tactically driving, that's another thing.
Oh, yeah.
You have to
Skip
learn when you
pads.
retire
Yeah.
to calm down a little bit. Boy, I don't know. I'm sure I have a lot of hidden bizarre talents that I don't know about. You know, one of the things I think you take from law enforcement or military, or any first responder, I should say, is that you really learn the gift of gab, don't you?
You do.
You know,
You do.
you really learn to communicate and read people, and at least you should. If you don't, then you were in the wrong career to begin with.
No,
But I don't
I
know
like
if
the way
it's
you
like,
look at that.
hmm I think you're like a chameleon. You can mold into any situations, no matter what it is. Walk into a party, you know, be confident in yourself, be comfortable.
Yes.
I think being a first responder gives you a lot of confidence. Sometimes people become overly confident, and that's unfortunate. And I think sometimes it attracts the wrong personality and it makes situations worse. You know, people who are super insecure now they have power, power of the badge, power of whatever. But I think for the most part, we tend to be able to function in a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different environments with being comfortable.
Okay. And that's good because this was going to be, one of the last questions I was going to ask you because of where you were in counterterrorism. So, in the context of the counterterrorism division, what were some of the key insights or lessons that you learned that you would think would be valuable for the broader law enforcement community? Was there anything specialized in there, especially looking at where we have so many active shooter events, where we have, so many uh, assaults and riots and things like that? Do you think there's a key thing that would help law enforcement as a whole from your time with CT?
Sure. I mean, boy, that's kind of a loaded question, right? You can look at it from many different marks. I mean, no one expected those riots, and they didn't expect them to be as bad as they were. And if anyone says different, they are absolutely lying. Um, I think we learned a lot from that, but we learn from our mistakes, and we learn by doing things like that. One of the biggest things is obviously social media is our friend, and we as law enforcement we have to be embedded into social media somehow, some way. If you're not,
Right.
you're missing the mark. There's also communications. Communications, I think we learned a lot from 9/11. I wasn't there, but I can only what's the word I want? I can only assume
Yeah.
that fire and police were not connected at the time. And I know for smaller agencies, this is probably kind of still the case. Like we have to have that constant communications and we need one hub. We can't just have everyone on the street communicating. We have to have a off-site type hub to do the communications in case that one goes down for whatever reason that may be. We have to heed the warnings of people who suffer from mental health issues. That is one of the biggest things ever. I can't express this enough. Every active shooter that I have seen, and this is non-clinical research or anything like that, let me
No
preface by
experience.
saying that,
Right.
yes,
Right.
But the things that I've read, because obviously I take it very personal because of my son, I think, okay, well, were there signs? I can't name one that I've read that there were not some signs that something was going to happen. And people knew and no one acted. No one was intervening. You know the old adage, if you see something, say something?
Yes, absolutely.
Why are we not doing that anymore?
I don't know. I think people are just so, because in some ways they look at social media. We see too much, and, they feel
Mm-hmm.
like they're being prodded into a response, or they're being baited into doing things. And then you see where certain situations were setups to elicit a response. So
Yes.
people are coming desensitized. It's like,
Yes.
let me see what happens, and I'll record it and I'll slap it up on TikTok and see what other people think. But that's it,
Boy, you're right about that.
and that's just a personal view. That is just my personal view on that.
No, I definitely agree with that. We are very desensitized. I remember an incident where scaffolding fell off the John Hancock. And if you're familiar with Chicago, it's a very, very tall building. And it crushed a car that was in
Wow.
traffic. Yeah, it was a very windy day, like extremely high winds. And I was the first car in the scene. And I remember going to that and trying to cordon off the area and tape it off. And um, it was two mothers and their two daughters in the vehicle.
Oh,
So,
geez.
yeah. And I didn't know at the time what their status was, but I knew obviously we had to get CFD there to analyze the situation because the car was crushed. So it wasn't like I could go in and try to rescue them because I just didn't have the ability nor the tools to do so.
Right.
So I was trying to make the scene safe. And I will never forget all these people taking out their phones. Now, this was this was early. This was way before Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, any of that. But
Yeah.
taking out their phones to film it. And I kept thinking, how sick are you that you want to put this on film to show people? We don't even
Yeah.
know if these people are alive in this car.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just really, it blew my mind and changed the way that I thought, because never in my mind had something tragic occurred would I think to pick up my phone first and film it. So
Yeah. I mean,
it,
that's just not something we usually would think about in our day,
right.
Um,
Although
but
the good end of that, I have to say, in a crazy situation, is that having those videos for law enforcement may benefit prosecution later.
right. Yeah.
So
I could see
double-edged
there.
sword.
Yeah. There's a lot of relative value, with some of these incidents, but then, again, like with some of the active shooter events, some of the, individual violence events, it's like, two of you guys, instead of filming, could have pulled these individuals apart, separated them, no weapons, but instead you let it, escalate
Hmm.
and get to these things.
Correct.
Um,
It's the
yeah,
day and age we live in. It's
it is.
bizarre.
It is. And we talk about bizarre and we talk about things, but, what kind of impact, is this going to have on future, generations, on their mental health, where they're constantly seeing this and it's like, oh, well, I can up this, and they go out and do some kind of challenge to see if they can be more aggressive, more violent, things like that. And so I worry about that because they're going to say, if that dude's famous, I'm going to be infamous. And that's a concern I have.
Oh yeah. And I think that happens a lot because social media projects that. And so I don't know if people understand the way your feed works. Oh my gosh, I cannot think of the word for the life of me. But when you start to search things, it actually feeds you, stuff about that. Like if I said, "Oh my God, I love trees," right? And I'm looking up different trees and how to plant them, grow them, feed them.
Right, right.
My feed is going to be all about trees. You're going to be in this bubble. So when situations happen that you're interested in, and let's say you have sort of a deviant mind, now it's going to feed that fuel. Now you're going to get those through all your social media channels.
Uh,
I wish I
right.
could think of the
Okay.
word, what it's called, but I can't think of it.
I am not that tech savvy,
No.
so hold on. I'm Googling donuts right now.
Well, now you're going to get donuts everywhere. See?
Well, now it's baguettes.
No, it's
I can't
really
even spell
true.
that.
Yeah, it kind of puts you in this box and gives
Yeah,
you this feed of, and so you don't even realize like there's other things out there.
true, true.
And then it networks you with other people
Right.
who like the same things, which could be good if you're looking at trees, but bad if you're
Yeah,
looking at, some type of violent act or,
yeah, that's true.
and
Yeah,
the other part you were talking about trauma, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I look at Chicago, we're having mass shootings consistently there, consistently. And no one's calling it mass shootings. Isn't that crazy? And you talk about trauma.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Is it just normalized now? People,
it is.
Chicago murder capital, but what is it? Is it the economic base? Is it drug related gangs? I mean, and that's all interconnected, I'm sure.
Sure, sure. And I can't answer that because I would need to do a major study of the city. I don't think anyone really has the answer to that, but I feel like these kids have become desensitized. It's nothing for them
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
ride their bike down the block next to a crime scene and see someone laying with bullet holes in them.
Oh,
And
yeah, they
and then
know
they'll
who it
be eating
is.
ice cream
Family,
and
yeah.
and so years ago we used to call it urban trauma. I'm sure they changed the name right now, but yeah, we're going to start, and that's going to have long-lasting effects because when they hit an older age, then they're like, "Oh, having guns is normal. Shooting people is normal."
Yeah, and
We've almost
that's
normalized the trauma and destruction.
well, they're being reprogrammed because before
Mm-hmm.
where they would have said, "Hey, we got to stop this black on black, white on white, Hispanic on Hispanic, Latino on. We need to stop this. We need to negate this." But that's I don't want to say it's a mental illness. Again, I think it's reprogramming. If you look at there was an old movie called Clockwork Orange,
Oh yes,
and and
remember it well.
yeah, they took the guy, they strapped him to a chair, they kept
Mm-hmm.
showing videos, to get him outside of that. And that's in effect kind of what somewhat social media and the things inside their environment, that's what's, happening. They're being reprogrammed. This is a fascination thing. This one, I could care less. And this one makes me sick or volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is something to worry about. And, luckily for people like you and others that have taken CIT, the people that are going to be first responders are going to be trained on, hey, this person may appear volatile, this person may be non-responsive, and is that something you think you could continue training others on as the CIT? Is there a potential that you could go to some departments, agencies, first responders, and give them some more, insight onto practical application and how it can help them in their communities?
Sure. We used to do it. We used to do more of an educational seminar than an actual training because training involves a lot of certifications by different states. I think each state has different standards. You have to submit it to their training board. Like that's a lot of work. But obviously,
And
it's
is that
something
why I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Julie.
Is
Is
that why
that why
companies
so many
what?
agents is that why companies or agencies are not doing it because of cost, time, and certification?
That's a good question. I don't know because if you're already doing training and you have certifications, why not go the extra step and get um, certification to put together some type of CIT program to train. And it doesn't have to be officers. You can go into workplaces and do it. You can go into schools and do it. I
Well, I
mean,
didn't mean
I'm
to
sure
step on
there's
you up
no,
there.
that's okay. I'm sure there's people out there now who are doing it. I can't think any off the top of my head, and I've kind of been removed from it for a couple of years. Life just changes and things change, and I went into counterterrorism, and the CIT thing kind of got left behind. But I would say 10 years ago, I hooked up with a friend of mine who was the program director for NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And we put together a program under NAMI just to do educational seminars, which was very similar to the
Nice.
training, but not a training. But now, obviously, law enforcement has to be trained and certified, and it has to be approved by their standards board.
That is great. Now, this leads up into this question. Is that how the Behind Our Door got started?
Ha. Well, I mean, yes and no. Her and I have been friends since then. We actually met through NAMI. I came in there to get information and resources and education about my son, and learn about the illnesses, and to help him as best I could, because I was a very proactive mother with his illness. And so, yeah, I met her. We became friends. I became a very active volunteer within the NAMI program. I did all kinds of, they have Ending the Silence. They have support groups, family to family,
Nice.
basics. Yeah. So I became very active as a volunteer. I also volunteered for other organizations, mental health organizations. And her and I have remained in contact for 15 years, mostly on, but we would talk for hours. So the long and short of it is,
Sorry for that hiccup, Julie. So could you pick right that back up?
sure. So the long and short of it is, we have remained friends, and then we started doing educational seminars in crisis intervention for law enforcement agencies. And during COVID, her and I would have long conversations about our own kids. She has a kid that suffers from mental health issues, and different things, different resources, things we saw in the news. And I said, gosh, Nancy, we should do a podcast, because I feel like this information should be out there. There's nowhere you can go if you have someone you love, or you yourself are diagnosed. Like, okay, what's step one? What do I do? Where do I go? Who do I call? Most people go to their doctor, and that is kind of not the wrong move, but there's a lot of doctors who just aren't trained in mental health, and don't recognize it right away. So, we're older, we're not young, and we thought, we're going to figure this out and start a resource podcast strictly geared toward mental health resources. Nothing really outside of that. Maybe that will unfold into something bigger later on, but currently,
I think it is. I think it is. I think you'll get listeners that call in and say, Julie, what did you notice? Because doctor said, oh, no, if he was autistic, he'd show this and this, this. But you actually haven't been through it. You guys are going to be huge for that. What did you see? What did you do? Where did you research?
right. And that's what I pray that happens, because, originally when I was trying to get my son diagnosed at a very young age, everyone kept telling me, there's nothing wrong with him. He's a boy. He's just hyper. He has a lot of energy. And it took me 5 long years to get him properly diagnosed. He was put on,
Wow, 5 years.
yes, he was put on ADHD medication. His current diagnosis is bipolar 1, and with ADHD, probably anxiety, probably, things, it ebbs and flows depending on his age. But the reality is, when he was put on ADHD medication, they actually made the situation worse. And what I found out years later is that ADHD and bipolar, a lot of their symptoms mirror each other. And being children, when they're growing and changing, and then it's really hard to get a pinpoint on what it is. And so what I've learned now, my son is now 30 years old, is that I don't get spun up on the diagnosis, but more about the treatment. So if you think it's something, try to find something in that realm. And I'm always for alternative medicine, alternative treatments.
Absolutely, yes.
I had, which you and I have talked about a little bit off the show. I'm always researching now. I'm like a crazy researcher, but and eventually we hope to have a great guest on who talks about functional medicine and stuff like that, because I think there's a lot more to it. I think, especially since we talked about trauma, let me just use that. Like, when you go through trauma, your whole physiological body reacts.
Correct.
It's a biological, let's repeat that. It's a biological change. So although we call it mental health, it's biologically based. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark. It's not a behavior. My son didn't have a behavior issue, and we didn't need to change the behavior, but we needed to figure out the biological base for his illness and how to treat that. So
absolutely, absolutely.
And that's things that we just want to share with other families and people going through it themselves, and let people know that they're not alone. It can be very scary and isolating when you're diagnosed, or someone, your loved one, is diagnosed, and, who wants to be the crazy person? No one wants to be the crazy person. So I speak very openly and candidly about my life, about my son, about the struggles I've been through, physically, emotionally, financially, you name it. I've been through all of it.
I'm sure,
And
especially with being in law enforcement going through all
well,
this.
that too, and having that
Yeah.
whole other aspect of it, of crazy schedule and not being the parent I wanted to be, and a lot of guilt. But I want families and people to know that you too can survive. There is another side of it. Keep going. One foot in front of the other, baby steps, keep going. At some point, you will find the right treatment. You will find the right person to help you, and you will get there, and you will get better. You can get better.
And that's what your show is going to do, Julie, combined, with your host and everything. That's just going to be a resource because other people that are going to be researching it are going to find you. But to help them find you quicker, how do they find your podcast? What is it hosted on? Is there a YouTube channel? Where is it located so others with similar search needs can find you?
Sure. The name of the podcast is called Behind Our Door, OUR Door, Behind Our Door. We are hosted on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Google Podcasts, a lot of them. We do have Instagram. We do have Facebook. We are not currently on YouTube, although that is something we are looking to expand this year. We took a mini break over the summer because we've been doing it for a year and a half, faithfully. And, we have lives, and I was moving and retiring. So we took a little break, and we're going to come back with bigger and better resources. And we're always looking. So the other way, if people want to contact us, we have an email. It's behindourdoor@mail.com. People are welcome to send us questions or comments, or, maybe they themselves have a great resource that they want us to put on the show. We would love it. We don't know everything. We're always seeking, learning, looking to see what the bigger and better thing is,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hope, as part of the resources, people look at that and say, all these years of doing the research and personally going through it, they'll say, well, that may not work for me. And you could say, well, here's other options. And I think that, that's great what you are doing with your show. Now, would you mind being on other podcasts so people can get additional information on this? So if there's other show hosts and stuff, would you mind them reaching out through your email on there and saying, hey, would you guys discuss this with us?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
We would love to. The more the merrier. We want people to get these resources. We want them to not feel alone. So we would go on whatever podcast, myself, Nancy, both of us, whatever people want. We're very flexible.
That is outstanding. Julie, thank you for your time. I know you're getting ready to go paint, and I'm getting ready to go find a way to get out of my chores. But, is there any last messages you'd like to give out before we end the show? Is there any, you've already said, hey, you can do this, you can find alternatives. Is there a final message you'd like them to think on or reflect on before we go?
Words of wisdom. Well, I think the biggest thing in life is never give up on hope, because hope is always there. And sometimes your brain is lying to you. So believe the people that support you and love you. Surround yourself with positive people.
That was great. That was something most people need to hear, because, again, being empathetic, we know people are going through a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you listening, I want you to take everything you heard from Julie. You're going to have trying situations. You're going to have trying times. It's going to be a new challenge for you to overcome, just like Julie did. Plan for the bad days. Prepare for when things collapse around you. Communicate, ask for assistance, reach out to Julie and her team, ask it about what other resources available, and engage in life. Now get the hell out of here and enjoy the rest of your day. Julie, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to have you back for a second show with another female officer.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. Thank you, Julie.
All right.
Thank you all. God bless.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.